Hello all, welcome to the Lunar Sea Spire Steven Universe fan video this time. I'm GC13.
And I'm David.
We're trying something a little bit new. We're gonna be doing this one both as podcast and as video. Hope you guys enjoy it. The topic we have chosen for our first video together features Bendy from the Steven Universe the movie trailer. What gem type is she?
I have literally no idea. No, I'm just kidding. Because obviously we did a little bit of research, a little bit of digging, and I think we have some pretty good theories.
We have two gem types that we've selected as being our favorites and most likely picks for what Bendy is. They both rely on a couple of assumptions that we're making based off of the trailer. We are assuming that whatever gem type Bendy is, it is going to be high class in the Era 2 Gem Empire hierarchy. Because from what I was getting off of the trailer, it seems to be implying that she's upset about the dismantling of the Empire. And even if we take that out, she has access to some pretty serious hardware with a single gem drill that is able to destroy all life on Earth in just 2 days. I don't think you can get that stuff off the shelf. So, as I said, we've settled on two gem types, Morganite and a Garnet, probably Pyrope, as we will discuss. Both have been name-dropped on the show before, and we have good reason to believe that both are high-class gems.
So as a side note, it doesn't exactly tell us what type of gem Bendy might be. But when we think about the fact that she has this massive drill, there's some implications that maybe relate to a kindergarten. Peridot was a certified kindergartner, and she knew how to fashion her own drill when she and Steven went to deal with the cluster. So Bendy could have technical skills like Peridot, perhaps from overseeing the development of a kindergarten too, or if she was somehow otherwise a leader in kindergarten production, she would probably be easily able to steal or hacking together this weapon from multiple sources. Also, when we think about her motivation, if she's upset about dismantling the Empire, that could be tied back to her role as a kindergartner leader as well, since she might be mad that all of the kindergartens are shutting down since the Empire is stopping their nefarious ways, making her role obsolescent and fueling her anger even farther than just being a gem who wants to keep the status quo.
So that brings us to our two possible gem types. Going first, I prefer the one I've always wanted Bendy to be, Morganite. Now, we have a pretty good expectation that Morganite is going to be a high-class gem because she's a beryl, just like Aquamarine, who is directly responsible to a diamond, or Emerald would be. Now, there is a bit of a counterexample here. Ruby and Sapphire are basically both corundum, but they are very different in purpose and hierarchy, so we don't know for a fact that a Morganite would absolutely 100% have to be high class, but when you consider that the only Morganite we've ever heard of had her own pearl, had her own ruby, I think it's a pretty safe assumption that Morganites are going to be right there on the level of Aquamarine and Emerald. And since we do know that a Morganite was Rhodonite's pearls and rubies owner, that does mean that she has been name-dropped in the show, and red Morganite is just about the right color for Bendy's gem. And if you do Google image search for red Morganite, you'll find that people really like cutting red Morganite into hearts. It really dominates the Google image search rankings for red Morganite right now.
Yeah, and let's just say that the Crewniverse hasn't exactly overcomplicated their choices before for gems on the show. So the fact that we see a lot of heart-shaped Morganite gems makes this choice pretty likely.
But we do have our second option, that Bendy is a garnet of some kind. Garnets would also be high-class gems because the only garnet that we know a lot about is Hessianite, who was the invasion leader for Earth, both seen in Monster Reunion and heavily featured, in the flesh in Save the Light. So we know for a fact that garnets are high-class.
Also in Together Alone, Blue Diamond, specifically referencing to the embarrassing fact that Garnet might even think about attending the Era 3 ball, called out Demantoids and Pyropes, in addition to Hessianites as being part of the Garnets that would come into the ball. So together we know that those are all high-class gems.
Since they would be entering together rather than separately, as the rubies and sapphires would have been.
Also, when we just think about the naming, Demantoid sounds a lot like Demented. which, as we see from many clips in the trailer, Bendy seems to be pretty at the edge of her mind with how she's dealing with her anger. But since demantoids seem to be pretty much like green and look almost nothing like Bendy's gem, this isn't exactly very strong, whereas pyropes are naturally a dark reddish pink hue and have a facet that's much like the complicated cut that we see for Bendy.
Blue did specifically in Together Alone call out, does that call herself a garnet? So that would actually be a point possibly in the favor of garnet being the actual gem type, or at least a actual gem type, although it would be odd because we have no quartz, we have no corundum, we just have, many different kinds of quartz such as amethyst or jasper. But as I've already said, if the name is not actually garnet, then it is probably going to be pyrope, based off of, obviously, the coloration, and the fact that pyropes were name-dropped in the show, although not as early or as prominently as Morganite.
Narratively, garnet makes a lot of sense because it sets up a conflict to happen in the movie. We do see in the trailer that Garnet and Bendy have a one-on-one face-off, and obviously having her be a quote-unquote real Garnet would bring up some sort of feelings or anger or other things. Also, because True Kinda Love is so heavily featured in the trailer, we can guess that maybe that would set up some kind of contrast with our upside-down heart-shaped gem, where there is a difference between what our Garnet, who, even though not being a real Garnet, has a true love inside her, whereas Bendy has a lot farther way to go.
We do know, based off of a podcast that Ms. Sugar did with Tom Sharpling, Greg's voice actor, we have a little bit more insight into kind of how fusions work. I guess I should just play the clip for you, but the capsule summary is the gem, such as garnet, or, in this case, Jasper's Corrupted Fusion, is based off of an actual gem type, but it is the fusion herself that chooses what to call herself, as garnet has.
We were basing it off of a specific type of zebra jasper. If you look it up, there's some that is, a lot of it is black and white, but there's some that's tinged orange. I wouldn't necessarily say that that's her name, because she would have to decide.
She's like a very mustardy color.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily what she would call herself yet, but if you look up this gem, you'll see where the inspiration came from.
But there is one out there possibility that we can't not bring up. The idea that maybe Bendy was meant as a replacement for Pink Diamond.
So this is a pretty out there theory, mostly because it doesn't have a lot of narrative sense to it. So although it's tempting because she's pink to think that she has some kind of relationship to Pink, it's probably more best explained that she's just a part of Pink's court somehow than that she's some sort of failed Pink Diamond experiment. If the Diamonds had chosen to make another diamond in the past, it's pretty weird that we've had no hint of it at all anywhere in the show, and it doesn't make a lot of sense for our grieving Diamond family that they would have had a long-lost sister that they would have gotten rid of at some point or forgotten, and that wouldn't have any kind of impact when they rediscovered Steven. So it's pretty strange.
Now, I'll give you, it would be kind of a retcon, but what if they had started making the replacement Pink Diamond sometime after the supposed shattering of Pink Diamond, and then after Steven's return, they just quietly terminate the project, and somehow, by some fluke, she survives and runs out to seek vengeance. She is very small compared to a diamond, and in this hypothesis, she would be undercooked, so much like Amethyst is small because she's overcooked, maybe this one would be small for being undercooked. But it is kind of interesting. Bendy is specifically based off of very old-school cartoon characters, and I can't think of any gem type that we know about that's more old-school than the diamonds, can you? I'm not saying it's a sure thing, I consider it to be an intriguing possibility. But I haven't talked myself into it yet. I'm still hoping for Morganite, and I do think that is the more likely of the two options we discussed today.
And just to put a counterpoint to Morganite, let's not forget that Garnet has demonstrated stretchy powers, and even though she's not a Garnet, Bendy can sure as heck stretch. So maybe Garnets can also stretch, even though Garnet isn't a Garnet. Who knows?
I mean, I wouldn't be sad if it turned out that Bendy was Garnet as well. That would be a great contrast to build in there, but I'm just not sold on it. We only have her fighting Garnet in that one shot. It's Steven she has to fight at the end. So guys, that's been our thoughts on who Bendy is. However, what gem do you think that Bendy is? Go ahead and let us know down there in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and all of that YouTube stuff for us. See you guys next week. Until then, I'm GC13.
And I'm David.